You've seen Planet of the Apes, right? A future where apes rule. But what if I told you the real question isn't about the future, but the deep, deep past? What if the story of intelligence on Earth has a prequel we never knew existed? We all know humans and chimpanzees are practically cousins, sharing something like 98 to 99% of our DNA. Yet look around. We build skyscrapers, write symphonies, and argue about pineapple on pizza. Chimps, brilliant as they are, mostly stick to, well, chimp stuff. It's a massive gap, right? Or is it? What if that gap wasn't always so wide? The stage for life on Earth was set billions of years ago, but for our story, let's zoom in on the last 20 million years or so. This is when the ape family tree really started branching out. Around 13 million years ago, the ancestors of orangutans decided to go their own way. Then, maybe 8 to 7 million years back, the gorilla lineage split off. And finally, around 6 to 5 million years ago, the paths of our ancestors and the ancestors of chimpanzees and bonobos diverged. Think about that. For millions of years, these lines of incredibly bright, cognitively advanced primates were evolving, exploring their world. We're talking about a period where the great apes, the ones capable of some seriously smart thinking, were already around, long before Homo sapiens even entered the scene, which was only about 300,000 years ago. So the potential for something interesting, something more than just basic survival, was brewing on this planet for a vast stretch of time. Now, when we look at modern great apes, we see flashes of brilliance that honestly blur the lines. Back in 1960, Jane Goodall watched a chimpanzee strip twigs to fish termites out of a mound. This wasn't just an animal using an object. This was an animal making a tool. It blew people's minds. It led the famous anthropologist Louis Leakey to say, "Now we must redefine tool, redefine man, or accept chimpanzees as human." And since then, we've seen chimps use stones to crack nuts, even sharpen branches to hunt. Different chimp groups even have their own tool-using traditions, their own little cultures. Orangutans use sticks for seeds and honey, and fashion leaves into umbrellas. Gorillas might use a stick to check how deep the water is. And in captivity, with a bit of a nudge from us, a bonobo named Kansi learned to chip flint flakes, just like our early ancestors did. The stone flakes he made looked uncannily similar to hominin tools from 2.5 million years ago. This suggests the capacity for that kind of technology was latent, hidden deep within the great ape lineage. And it's not just tools. They communicate with complex gestures, expressions, and vocalizations. We can even understand many of their gestures, hinting at some ancient, shared communication system. Apes in research settings have learned hundreds of sign language signs, used symbols on keyboards, formed simple sentences, even made up new names for things they didn't have a word for. They don't have human grammar, but the foundation for complex symbolic communication? It's there. They learn from each other, pass down behaviors. Chimp moms have even been seen actively teaching their kids the best way to fish for termites, sharing tools, adjusting techniques. These are sparks of culture, of sophisticated cognition. So if they have these sparks, what stopped a real fire from catching? Or, more intriguingly, are we absolutely sure it never did? Somewhere in a lost chapter of prehistory. So what's the holdup? If apes are so smart, why didn't they build Rome, or at least a very impressive termite mound empire? Scientists point to a few key differences, at least in the apes we see today. Our brains are significantly larger, around 1,400 cubic centimeters compared to a chimp's 400. And it's not just size, our brains are wired differently, especially in areas for planning and abstract thought. While our ancestors' brains gradually got bigger over millions of years, ape brains mostly stayed the same. Then there's speech. Humans have a unique voice box and the brain wiring to go with it, largely thanks to a gene called FOXP2. The human version works differently than the chimp one, essentially wiring our brains for language in a way theirs aren't. Without that kind of high-fidelity communication, it's tough to build up complex knowledge generation after generation. And while apes learn socially, human kids are social learning superstars. We seem uniquely wired to teach and imitate. One researcher, Michael Tomasello, put it bluntly, "Nobody listens to Chimp Einstein." An ape genius might invent something amazing, but that idea often dies with them. We, on the other hand, copy, share, and build on innovations relentlessly. Plus, our ancestors moved out of the forests, faced new challenges on the savanna that probably pushed our intelligence and cooperation. Most apes stayed in relatively stable forest environments where their existing skills worked just fine. There wasn't the same intense pressure to change. And let's be honest, apes are incredibly strong. They don't need a spear to get by when they can climb and forage so effectively. But here's where we get to the juicy what if. Evolution isn't a straight line. It's a messy, branching bush. What if a particular group of apes, millions of years ago, faced a unique set of environmental pressures? What if a small genetic tweak, maybe their own version of a language-enabling gene, or a slight boost in brain plasticity, occurred in an isolated population? Could that have set them on a different path, even for a while? Consider a 50,000-year window. In evolutionary terms, that's a blink. For significant biological changes, like a massive brain expansion, it's probably too short without some extreme, almost artificial pressure. Apes have long generation times. 50,000 years is only about 2,000 generations. But cultural change? That can happen much, much faster. If a hypothetical ape species already had a cognitive toolkit close to early humans, 50,000 years could be plenty of time for a cultural bloom. After all, our own species went from basic stone tools to creating stunning art and complex societies in a similar time frame. We developed agriculture and the first villages in just the last 10,000 years. So if the mental engine is there, culture can hit the accelerator. Could an ape group, perhaps already a bit more advanced, have developed their own version of a Stone Age with unique tools, maybe even rudimentary villages, over tens of thousands of years? It's a long shot based on what we know, but the history of life is full of long shots that came through. The big question is, if they did, would we even know? This is where it gets really interesting. If an intelligent ape species did have a run, however brief, would we find any trace of it today? Or could it be lost, hidden, or even misinterpreted? Think about what lasts. If they made stone tools, those can survive for millions of years. We find hominin stone tools that are over 3 million years old. So if an ape civilization used stone, we could theoretically find their handiwork. But here's the kicker. Stone flakes and choppers don't come stamped with "made by Homo habilis" or "property of ape tribe X." If we dug up a million-year-old stone tool in Africa, we'd naturally assume one of our direct ancestors made it. How could we tell if it was crafted by a different, intelligent, non-hominin ape unless we found their bones right next to it? And that's a big if. The fossil record for apes is notoriously patchy, especially for those living in humid forests. Rainforest soils are acidic. They dissolve bone. It's a known bias. We have almost zero fossil chimpanzee ancestors from the last few million years in Africa's rainforests. Yet chimps are obviously here, so their ancestors were too. Their bones just didn't get the VIP fossilization treatment that some of our ancestors did in drier Rift Valley areas. So could an entire ape species, maybe even one that developed a simple culture, have lived and died in such an environment, leaving no skeletal trace? Absolutely. Their bones might have simply disintegrated, or they're buried deep in unexplored jungle. If their bones are missing, why not the fleeting traces of a rudimentary culture? And what about the scale of this hypothetical civilization? If it was just a few thousand individuals, maybe in a specific region, for a few millennia, its footprint would be tiny. We humans have drastically altered the entire planet. An early ape culture might have only made local changes. If they didn't get into large-scale agriculture or metalworking, which is highly unlikely, their impact would be subtle. Small clearings, maybe simple wooden huts, wood rots. We have found incredibly ancient wooden structures, like a 476,000-year-old platform in Zambia. But these finds are exceptionally rare, preserved only in waterlogged, oxygen-free conditions. Normally, a wooden hut from 50,000 years ago would be completely gone, leaving maybe some faint post holes that could easily be missed or mistaken for natural features. It's fascinating that there's a field called primate archaeology, Researchers have found sites in West Africa where chimpanzees have been using stone anvils to crack nuts for at least 4,000 years. They've found ancient cracked nuts and stones with specific wear patterns buried in the soil. Now imagine those sites were, say, 400,000 years old, and we didn't have modern chimps to show us they do this. What would archaeologists think? Early human activity, right? So yes, the evidence of a very simple ape proto-civilization could theoretically be hidden in plain sight or misattributed. Then there's good old planet Earth itself, constantly remodeling. Plate tectonics recycle land masses, glaciers grind surfaces to dust, erosion scatters everything. Scientists exploring something called the Silurian hypothesis, a thought experiment about detecting industrial civilizations in Earth's deep past, noted that very little of Earth's surface remains unchanged over tens of millions of years. The chance of specific urbanized areas being preserved is tiny. Our hypothetical ape civilization wasn't industrial, but the principle applies. The older and more localized it was, the higher the chance natural processes have just wiped the slate clean. So when we look at our own ancestors, what kind of clues do they leave? Stone tools and lots of them? That's the main thing. Occasionally their bones, if they fossilized well. Much later, evidence of controlled fire, like ash and charred bones in caves, starting maybe a million years ago. Really, really rarely hints of structures, like those ancient wooden logs in Zambia. And then, much, much later, around 100,000 years ago, we start seeing symbolic stuff. Art, beads. If a non-human ape species had a parallel journey, we'd expect to find something similar. Maybe advanced tools in an area where no known hominins lived at that time, or fossils of an ape that just doesn't fit the known family tree, found with cultural items. The fact that we haven't found such a smoking gun strongly suggests it didn't happen, or it left such a faint trail in such an obscure place, made of such perishable materials, that we've simply walked right over it. So, where does that leave us? The idea of a pre-human ape civilization, a real-life ancient planet of the apes, is firmly in the realm of speculation, not established science. The evolutionary story we know suggests only our lineage truly broke through to complex technology and symbolic culture. Our ape cousins, for all their intelligence, seem to have been constrained by their biology and environment in ways our ancestors weren't. A 50,000-year evolutionary sprint to civilization for apes? Highly improbable. But, and this is the fun part of deep research, the absence of evidence isn't always definitive proof of absence. Could evidence be lost forever? Certainly. Could it be awaiting discovery in some unexplored jungle or deep sediment layer? Possibly. Could we have found bits and pieces and just not recognize them for what they are? That's also not impossible. The odds are very, very slim. But are they absolutely zero? When we consider the vastness of geological time, the incompleteness of the fossil record, especially for forest-dwelling apes, and the fact that simple cultures leave very subtle traces, that zero starts to look a tiny bit fuzzy around the edges. Everything we know from early hominins tells us that basic artifacts, especially stone tools, can last for an incredibly long time. So the lack of any truly anomalous, non-hominin finds is a powerful argument against such an ape civilization. But the universe of what's possible is always a bit bigger than the universe of what we currently know for a fact. The Earth has been around for a very long time, and life has taken some pretty wild turns. What if our civilization isn't the absolute first stirring of complex intelligence on this planet, but just the one that happened to use a lot of stone, and later left a very obvious, very durable, and frankly, planet-altering mess? If you want to keep digging into the mysteries our planet might still be hiding, and explore more of the latest science that makes you question everything, well, you're in the right place. We've got a lot more coming your way.